Oh, the Prophet of Godfire, Book 4 of the Godfire series, October 2001. Dedication. To all heart, to fire of God itself, to all spirit, in sound and in light, to all transcenders and devotees and heart lovers, to all earth, all planets, suns, moons, and worlds, to all family and their families, to all children and their children, to all practitioners, companions, and friends throughout the universes, blessings of great silence. Heart is the question only God is the answer to. When the heart is God, then your love is goodness. Your being here is a question you find hard to answer, because you have yet to determine in what way and to what degree you are actually being and actually here. If you are merely in the shallows of being, what you hear as a question or answer is self-thought, and no thought at all worth listening to. Truly, when you are deep in being, what you hear is nothing of a question, and everything of an answer. At first, the cause is the question, and the effect is the answer. Then the effect is the question, and the cause is the answer. But when your level of being is beyond being itself, as in the case of those who enter the love of the heart, then silence is the questionless question, whose answerless answer is obviously liberation transcendence. Truly, life is already the answer to the question, am I? And enlightenment is the answer to the question, I am. Oh, the Prophet of Godfire, Book 4 of the Godfire series, October 2001. Dedication. To all heart, to fire of God itself, to all spirit, in sound and in light, to all transcenders and devotees and heart lovers, to all earth, all planets, suns, moons, and worlds, to all family and their families, to all children and their children, to all practitioners, companions, and friends throughout the universes, blessings of great silence. Heart is the question only God is the answer to. When the heart is God, then your love is goodness. Your being here is a question you find hard to answer, because you have yet to determine in what way and to what degree you are actually being and actually here. If you are merely in the shallows of being, what you hear as a question or answer is self-thought, and no thought at all worth listening to. Truly, when you are deep in being, what you hear is nothing of a question, and everything of an answer. At first, the cause is the question, and the effect is the answer. Then the effect is the question, and the cause is the answer. But when your level of being is beyond being itself, as in the case of those who enter the love of the heart, then silence is the questionless question, whose answerless answer is obviously liberation transcendence. Truly, life is already the answer to the question, am I? And enlightenment is the answer to the question, I am. Or you. Please.
So the Dharma says that everybody has their own path. It's an individual process.
Remember, it's a figure of speech. And that is true up to a point. But everyone is every path. You look at it from a cosmic understanding. We're being fed. The path is being created because of the nature of the universe, not because you have a path, you have a thought about it. We are the universe. The universe is fueling us. Right? The energies of the universe. The solar system is just like a first level of the physical fact of what this is. We're sharing the same space, the same energy field. Right? The cosmic field, the etheric field is what we're talking about. It's all pervasive etheric field. Etheric field. Ethers. We're breathing them, we're seeing them. So we are, let's say, relative to the blood path, on a very definite path. If we're talking about the spiritual path, yeah, we're all on that, depending on how much we sacrifice of the programming that snuffs out our ability to be radiant beings.
So is there a quality that when present is an enormous asset, or when absent is a total block to spiritual progression? A quality in a being where if it's there, the being will move, and if it's not there...
Are you saying, does the boat have sails? Yes, every boat has sails, but the size of those sails is really the question.
So
common sense and reasoning are part of the sail process. We all have sails, but you have to configure them so that they are working in cooperation with the wind.
Because you mentioned that, as you were coming up through your history and your path, certain things showed up that were unusual. Lack of sleep, tons of energy, fasting,
later
those
on,
types of impulses.
These we'd have to call signs of purification. Dematerialization would be a better word. Signs of dematerialization, feeling lighter, and moving from the power of lighter bodies. Right? Light, moving towards light consumption or God food. Right? The God eaters. We're all basically God eaters, but we don't know that ordinarily until we have to fast, and we start to realize that once you give up your need, your desire, your programming for food, you start to feed off of light, and you really enjoy the light more than you did your flesh body. Then you reach a crisis point where you either have to go back to eating food, right? Even if you don't want to, because you love your own light. Right, the light of the stars and let's say the fire of purification that's active in your body, or you have to go down the tube, the path of dying in the process if you don't turn around and reverse the process and nourish your body accordingly. So we reach that point. After 3 days of fasting, most people lose their appetite. 3 to 7 days, definitely you lose your appetite. After that, if you go on 10 days, 15 days, you're in a zone where there's no food needed. But of course you need basic food, basic sustenance and drink, but the food thing fades out. And if you don't go that far, you're not going to know. And is it powerful? Yes, you feel the power of the lightness of the body and the subtle bodies. The astral body, feed off the astral body. Right? You feed off of the other bodies that we have. Mental body starts to be refined. But that's a purificational process. I don't say that everybody has to go through that, but some people need to go through that in order to get to the place where they are at peace with their sensuality, at peace with the body, right? And that the urges and the programs from the vital body and in terms of desires and appetite and these kinds of karmas, which are machinery, blood machinery, they start to lighten up, ease up, and fade. They fade. Why? Because they are part of the animal level of the human nature. And they fade. They can be starved away. Okay. We do have higher bodies, and sometimes you hear these stories that people are in jail or they're confined, and all of a sudden they start having out-of-body experiences because of the extremity of the circumstances, right? And feeling confined. Perfect place to project from. Comment, questions?
Well, you would need less sleep also if you weren't eating.
Absolutely, right. There's no question about it. Less sleep is okay. Less food is okay as well. Not for everybody to the same degree. One has to master what their condition is as a physical being, as an emotional being, and as a memory being, a causal body being, as well as, let's say, a psychic, astral, or higher sort of star being, and getting up to the mental levels, mind being, mental being. Then you go beyond that. But that's the theory. Because we are beyond that now. See, as soon as we recognize itness or isness in the moment, who are you in that moment? There's no you in that moment. So we can be recovered to nowness. Let's call it nowness or isness. The isness of being, not the things of being. Being this thing, being that thing, being this one, being that one, being a memory, being an image. We are beyond that. Right? Pure beingness is the real that enables all the other forms and maybe effects of being to show up and be validated by the ego, the self of attachment. Nobody is that. Everybody's practicing that to survive till you get, let's say, to the house of the master or to the path of the Dhamma, where you start to see yourself as needing spirit more than matter. Spiritual food more than physical food. And that's not a forced thing. You have to evolve to that point where you're ready to step up into a light realm, a realm of super light, if you can get there. It's not guaranteed, it's not promised. No one says it's necessary. But is it part of our process? Yes, because every night when we go into the no consciousness, we're already where the God is, but we're not conscious of it as such. It's never not here. Depends on what you expect its form to be. But it's present. It's living space. The space of living. See? The super space of living. That connects one and every other, right, to each other and the universe. There is a wholeness that we seem to be unaware of, because we are so super aware of selfness, when we are here to evolve to unawareness, enlightenment, unconscious enlightenment of unconscious reality.
Well, why would you, what I mentioned before about what would you attribute all of the musicians that you play with, some of the great musicians who didn't pick up?
They weren't looking. They weren't looking. No one was wanting to tell anybody anything about anything. So the process has been selfless participation in the field of music and working with the people who wanted to work with without feeling that was my opportunity to grandstand any knowledge or wisdom that I possess by nature.
Yeah, but I mean...
If I was asked a question, I would answer questions.
But nobody, I mean, look at all the cats that, didn't pick up on your...
Well, no, I can't say that. You don't know what they told me when we were playing together. Most of the musicians you can name have told me about what they felt when they played with me.
But it didn't seem to make a profound...
It wasn't supposed to. Why should it make a profound effect on anyone?
In terms of their lives or their
It's like, who cares? Who cares? It's up to them.
Some of them went through some bad, some pretty bad changes.
Well, that's up to them to decide what they need and where they are. Was I approached by musicians along the way in private? Yes, of course.
But I mean, let's take for example, Hilton, for example. Mm-hmm. I mean, he went through some very bad karma.
He was trying to approach me, Hilton Ruiz, before he passed, before he went down to New Orleans, which is coincident, asked me for my book. He says, Desiji, I think I'm ready to read your book. Godfire Symphony. And I said, Hilton, it's a strong book. I hope you get a chance to read it. And he said, yeah, send it to me. I sent it to him. He said he was ready. It's possible that earlier, years before when we were playing with Pharaoh, he felt something. Because he would come up to me and talk to me and say, I don't know if I should kill you or love you. So he had a little bit of conflict relative to where I was coming from, because there was a time when he said, hey, why don't you play with us Puerto Ricans? Why are you playing with Pharaoh and those cats? Well, for one thing, they called me out to play with them. Pharaoh wanted me to play with him. So I was there. It was a call of duty for me to be with Pharaoh Sanders. I don't think I could work my way into his band without him wanting it to happen. So that's obviously what happened. He heard me play and he said, I want you in my band. That's the history of it. So he asked, and he was always asking me spiritual questions. Always. For the 40 years I knew him, almost 40 years, he was always asking me. He turned to me to answer his questions. That was my purpose in his band. And on occasion, to push him, and be of service to him as I am to everybody. But quietly so. He knew I was a spiritual person, no question about it. So those who were sensitive enough picked up on it. Raklam immediately. Lamsovo Medeski immediately. Maybe you immediately. A lot of other people immediately, but that didn't mean they were ready to practice and give up anything themselves. See, the recognition of somebody who's on the path is a recognition of somebody who's on the path. There's no obligation one way or other. You stay where you are, or you ask questions, and maybe move in a certain direction, or because you met that person, maybe your path starts to open up, because it might necessarily be different. Doesn't have to be the same form. But the fire of the being, the fire of the practice does affect people, which is like saying, yeah, it's good to practice. Go to your practice. It's good to practice. Change your game. Stop looking out for the light. Maybe look inside for the light, because after all, everybody is the light they don't know they are.
Can you talk about the spiritual field as it relates to either, people and the sort of bhakti thing, or whether that is not necessarily what it means?
What's going on the surface is not all there is. See, if we know that beyond a doubt, then you know that what there is inner work. That's where the power is. It's not obvious. If you see it, doesn't mean it's real. If you hear it, doesn't mean it's real. It's only what you hear with your ears. The real is not that. What the real is not what you see or what you hear or what you feel necessarily, because it's not physical. There's a subtle, or the spiritual, that means non-material component, which is the domain of preference. Everything in terms of all the dharmas, or all the wonderful great techniques and practices and dharmas and initiations and whatever, are going towards zero. They're not going towards accumulation and social acceptance. We're talking about going back to the spiritual, means invisibility. Hello? Have you become invisible yet? Right? Who? The spiritual. That could be considered relative to human perception non-existing. Well, where is it? Good question. That's the point. Where is it? It's nowhere. You can see, hear, and feel and manipulate. As I would say earlier, you can't put this in your pocket. You'd like to take it home with you, pull it out, and do your thing with it, but that's not what it is. See? If it's spiritual, good luck. Therefore, it is said in many traditions, it's incomprehensible. If it's incomprehensible, what's everybody playing ball with it for? How can they just play ball with it in their conversations? Everything is spiritual, this, spiritual, that, and I'm doing this and I did that. That's not what it is. It's social field. Now, if you see somebody comes and you can't get a word out of them, maybe you might suspect they may have access to what we're talking about. That's the one I want to talk to. I want to be around that one. Then you look at that person and they may have nothing to say to you, and you say, well, it might be here. It just might be here.
Seems like we as students may want the spiritual process to work a certain way.
Yeah, we as friends. Yeah, we are friends. Yeah? We are friends in the spirit. Right. And that implies that we all hear the same thing. We all can feel the same thing. Right. When we speak of the heart in spiritual terms, we're saying something which is the universal heart. The heart is the heart, say, of the heart of the heart of the heart. Say, one heart. And when we hear, we can hear with one ear, but do we? But we can hear with one ear. Now in terms of the writings are not made for the self. They're not given to the self-mind. So they can easily bypass the self-mind and become like nothing to a person who reads it, because they may be in self-mind. They don't get it. They can understand the language, but even understanding the language because it's in English or in Hindu or in Tibetan or whatever, doesn't mean you're going to get the message. The message, in truth, does not have to equal what the saying is. But the saying itself can be a key to what the meaning is. And that, of course, is part of the mysteriousness of the spiritual level. So, and when we're talking about Zen practice, which is often a venue for symbolic communication relative to the Dharma, there's the truth. What does this dot mean in this place? Which is probably radically different from the dot in this place, in meaning depending on who. So it's not all concrete words. And I used to use a phrase, I think back in the day, called wind doors. Not just windows, but the wind doors. So that certain books are wind doors. Windows, but doors to pass through into the reality beyond your self-mind, relative to the possible experiencing of realization implied by the language, right? In the form of the wind door, see, to see through, to be beyond. And that's also true in terms of the karma that we have brought into this life, that stands before us, that we are experiencing in time and space through energy and matter, right? That karma is supposed to be treated as wood for the fire, not as stuff to get stuck in, or take so personally you're frozen in a form of preoccupation with the thing or the person. No one says that's the law or the way. That's the self being preoccupied with too many unnecessary devices that are called obstructive in nature, but who's intelligent enough to know who and what that is as it shows up? From this highest level of no thing, right? No self, no mind, and everything is an obstruction. And everyone is also an obstruction if you're not careful, that will hold you back.
What would you call it, an obstruction or a snare or a trap?
Obstruction, same thing, maybe even heavier in its implications. I mean, it stands in the way.
Well, it's an obstruction, you can go around an obstruction.
I already said it clear enough. Anything, anyone. What you're talking about are different things. Anything, anyone. Obstruction, appearance. For who? For how long and why? We're not talking about the spirit of this process. We're talking about the forms that show up, see, as potential obstructions to the process. Depending on how your mind solidifies it, recalls it, defines it, concretizes it, and causes it to be, in fact, another memory which is obstructive in terms of consciousness, which needs to be liberated. Yeah.
Can you repeat?
To hear this Dharma is to say goodbye to the past. There is no past. But in terms of our memory anchors to the past, this is to say goodbye to that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's what the function of the teacher, from the point of view of the fire, is supposed to do. It's to liberate you by fire from the past and the darkness the past can be if you're not in the liberational process by way of self-liberation, realization of spirit as emptiness. Mm-hmm. Pure, radical, radiant emptiness. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The wonderful, beautiful path of Dhamma is what you must get beyond. The meditation in the Dhammas is what you must get beyond. The results of the meditation in the Dhamma is what you have to get beyond. Continually burn. Images of the Buddha are what you have to get beyond. Image of self as Buddha is what you have to get beyond. You don't have very much to hang on to. And that's what self-liberation processing is about. Letting go of everything, everyone, properly, spiritually, compassionately, and lovingly, Hugh. So talking about the ancient gurus is good. It's information, historic, maybe for some inspiring, because then they see who need this for, let's say, inspirational purposes. They see examples of what they would ultimately want to be somewhat like or in step with. That's not going to help you. Holding on to anything past, it's a big question mark in the burn process. You have to let go of everything. But you need the recognition, fundamental intuition, that everything that's showing up in your karmic mind is garbage beyond the point of immediate, functional, or direct necessity. Because if you're trying to reach peace in the turbulence of an undisciplined karmic mind, you're in trouble. It doesn't matter how many years you spend in the monastery. And I've heard many stories as I've gone from monastery to monastery, or from ashram to ashram, institute to institute, right? Practice to practice joints, right? Like many jazz clubs, I've gone to these places, right? And found people just wallowing in the quagmire of what's going on there. So they weren't using it as a stepping stone, they were using it as a mud flap, right? A place to bathe in the mud of what was and what is happening. But there's no getting out of it. There's no walking through it or walking around it. So when you hear the phrases or these lines in the traditions, oh, this is a precious life, but what are you doing with it? Right. What are you doing with this life? Are you practicing like moment to moment on fire in the spirit of purification? Or are you just hanging out? Waiting for it to come down to you instead of opening to what it is already. So no, it's going to come down the spaceship and it's going to yank me up, beam me up. Maybe. But you need to open, because that is your function as a human being. And that is to master openness, receptivity, which is an important universal word, to what it already is, spirit. Open to spirit, receive from spirit. That, of course, becomes a mystery. What in the world is spirit that I need to be more open to than I ordinarily am? Big question. And there are primarily two doors to that. Two doors to that. The heart door and the brain door. Sahasrara, Ajna, right? And Hridaya here, heart opening. Okay. The rest of the body doesn't count. That's for evacuating, for eliminating stuff. Here, up, is part of the ascension. This here is the descension. That's the theory, concept for the yogis. Up, yeah. Attention up here, good practice. We are just as much up here as we are here. You need to know that for yourself. Mm-hmm. And here means all beings, not just yourself and your preferences for beings. This here is universal center of heart consciousness, infinitely so. We need to realize that, put that into practice, not take it as a theory and as a momentary opinion. It's up to us to realize what the adepts pass on to us out of the grace of their heart and kindness.